Hello, artists and animators. This panel discussion on animation industry careers features three experienced animators. We'll be speaking with panelists Eden Timm, Boachie, and Maxwell Racz about their work, their outlook on the industry, and advice for aspiring artists interested in animation. So, welcome to the panel. Let's start with introductions. Starting with you, Max, how would you describe your day-to-day work during a typical production?
Well, hello, I am currently a lead animator in Vancouver, BC. So my day-to-day isn't really a set schedule. Sometimes I'm animating, sometimes I'm checking builds, sometimes I'm checking with the crew. As a lead animator, you have to wear a lot of different hats, and you can't really be set to one certain expectation of what your day is going to be. So I do a bit of animation, build checking, checking on people, and every day is kind of different.
And your role too is with cutout animation too. Is that correct?
Yes, I work in cutout animation, so it's mostly just trying to make it look as close to 2D as possible using builds.
All right. And Eden, how would you describe your role and what a typical day looks like in your role?
So I'm currently an assistant director in cutout animation as well in Harmony. Very similar to Max, it's a lot of hats and not really a set schedule. I basically come in, check in with like the supervising director and production and the teams and see where the fire is and where I should go, or what the deadline priority is and where I should go. So any given day, I could be reviewing animatics, I could be going over scripts, I could be doing thumbnailing, animation, BG fixes, helping animation deliveries, comp, and currently doing a lot of post production stuff. So that's been fun. It's all over the place.
And Nana, what is your role and what does a typical day look like for you?
I am a 2D animator. I work on productions that are mostly like similar to what Max described, a lot of build and cutout kind of work, but oftentimes the goal is to try to make them look as closer to traditional as possible. My day to day usually involves addressing assignments that I have, and these are shots that a director or an assistant director has given me. Usually, like some days, sometimes it's every day or every few days, depending on the production. We'll have meetings called dailies, in which all the animators, sometimes also animators and designers and build artists, come together in a meeting to look over our progress, make sure that we're keeping to the show or production style. Sometimes we'll get notes from our heads, our leads, our directors, and address them. And our goal normally is to get like a certain amount of either shots or frames finished or completed within like a week. Some places usually do like 2 weeks.
All right. I wanted to ask, what led you into a career in animation? Nana, what was your sort of way into the industry, and was there anything about the animation industry that you didn't expect?
Something that I really enjoy about animation is that it's a really, really good vehicle for storytelling. And I like entertaining people a lot. And as a teenager, I got Macromedia Flash and I made like my own kind of shorts with my friends. And we would upload them to Newgrounds because that was like the hit place to be in the 2000s, I guess. But yeah, that after a time that kind of hobbies became like more and more accessible as a real career. So I went to Savannah College of Art and Design. And pretty much after graduating, I didn't work on shows immediately, but I worked on a lot of like ad campaigns and things for nonprofits. And eventually it kind of rolled over into like, I think my first show, which was Word Roll, was a PBS Kids show. And like I've been in love with that process ever since. To answer your second question, something I didn't expect, I think, is at least from, I guess, in my experience as like a non union animator, I suppose, there's kind of sort of a nomadic lifestyle to the career in which you're often on the hunt for the new production. Some places they'll keep you, they can keep you over for multiple productions, but sometimes the work might not be there. So you need to, kind of have your newer contracts like lined up for the future. So it's sort of like a hunt regularly, if I could put it in such an odd way. But yeah, sometimes that involves moving. Sometimes that just kind of involves like working in a completely different style that you didn't know before. It's a lot of change and adaptation.
And Nana, I know with your experience, you've worked on both shows that are like preschool animation and also very much not preschool animation. Do you find that's a difficult? I know there are a lot of artists who feel like they wind up sort of pigeonholed in one category or the other. Did you find that's a difficult thing to move between?
I guess a little bit. And it's not necessarily because of the style. I think because I started out sort of freelancing before, jumping into something more consistent like TV and streaming, I felt like I could just do about anything. So if one day or like one year it's like I'm working on this kid show and the next year it's like this show has a lot of curse words in it. I guess I'll be working on this show. Um, the actual art itself isn't hard to adapt to. However, um, depending on the studio that you're working with, sometimes they just kind of have like a line of contracts or like a certain kind of set of shows that they work on more often than another. One studio that I was a part of, they did mostly mature content. I think I was there for a few years and probably only had like one kid production, but like a large amount of like adult productions. And I think I left and I worked on like another child show. But yeah, I've talked to artists before who also kind of feel like, oh, I'm always doing like this, but I want to try something different. And sometimes you have to go to different work just entirely if maybe the place that you're at just isn't creating the sort of work that you want to create. Yeah.
Well said. Maxwell, I wanted to ask you the same question. What led you into a career in animation, and was there anything about the animation industry that you didn't expect when you got there?
I think my path into animation is kind of the similar as most people. They draw a lot as a kid. They're that kid that all they do is doodle, 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 doodle. And then it comes to be a point where you have to figure out, how can I make money doing this? So I was that kid that drew. I ended up going to Sheridan for animation. And after I graduated, I kind of had a reconsideration if I wanted to make this a career, but I came back to always that I love storytelling, and animation is such a strong medium for storytelling that can reach across different languages, different backgrounds, different cultures, and you can share so much in this really visual medium. So I ended up jumping back into animation, working on feature films and television, and I haven't looked back. It's still really, really like my core of my being. It's my heart. As for your second question, something that I didn't expect, I think I would say is that even as an animator, you have to understand a lot of different skills, not just animating. So working in cutout animation, you need to have an idea of builds just to be an efficient animator. You should understand a bit of design so you can still make everything look good. You have to be very hyper aware of each step of the pipeline too, because you don't want to pass something that can't go through the next step. So that's something I didn't really anticipate. I thought that I would just be like put in a corner and start animating, start drawing, make things look nice. But there's a lot of learning on top of it.
And Eden, what was your path into animation as a career, and was there anything about the industry that you didn't expect when you entered?
So my path into animation was similar to like being the kid who likes to draw. And one day it kind of just hit me after watching, like getting into anime for the first time ever when I was a little tween, realizing that like it's not just uh, a show on television. People actually make that stuff, and that could be a career that I could pursue. when I was in high school. College by chance was touring across Canada. They stopped at my high school and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. So I moved 2 provinces over, went to a little 2-year course college for 3D animation, and then I got a job in 3D. I realized that I didn't really like 3D that much. Like, it's a great medium, but it just wasn't really, I kept getting pulled to like wanting to draw things again. So by chance, I asked a higher up who was visiting our little satellite studio if I could test for a 2D show. And he was like, you should just go on it. And I've been kind of like, I've been primarily in 2D ever since. But because of my like background in 3D, I keep getting put onto shows, 2D shows that need 3D integration, whether we're like, adding 3D vehicles or we need like 3D environments in Harmony's 3D space. Because of that kind of background history, I tend to be the go-to person to blend the two together. As far as, was there anything about the industry I didn't expect? This is a goofy answer. There's so much math. You get into animation and like art and you're like, I suck at math. I got D's and F's the whole time in high school. I'm going to get into art. And when you're an animator, you get assigned quota and then you have to figure out how you're going to nail your quota in the time allotted. So that's a very simple formula of like, I have this many days, this many seconds, do the math. But when you get up into a supervisory role, you have to assign out quota to people and balance difficulties, the days they're there, their vacations, their sick days, for a crew of 8 to sometimes 25 people. And that's a ton of math. And then you also have to start considering like, oh, there's this thing happening in production. We need to rework the schedule. You have to suddenly hop onto your little Excel doc, calculate all the math, how much extra help we're going to need, who we're going to lose. And it's been shocking how much more fun it is. I'm not good at math, but when it's something more applied, it's a lot more fun to wrap my head around. But thank God for production staff, because they are math geniuses. They're Excel wizards. I am in awe of their power all the time. But if you want to move up from an artist into a leadership role, be prepared for a lot more math than you expect.
I find with animation artists, you either have artists who love math and are very mathy and are kind of scary with math, or you have artists who will run and hide under the desk for math because math is some form of witchcraft, really. Like there are symbols. Sometimes there aren't even like numbers there. They're just like letters.
I feel like I was more the second camp, but as I got like production staff explaining their magic texts to me and like teaching me what all these mysterious runes meant, I am slowly transitioning to the first camp of like, math is fun.
Going from our question before we started recording, it seems like everybody on this call had some experience with anime in their formative years. I just wanted to ask, what anime was that for you, Eden?
It was Naruto. Is my top tier best favorite anime. The very first time that the Sasuke and Naruto have the fight in the Valley of Death, where they hire like a specific key animator and animation director for it, and the style changes ever so slightly. That was like the moment for me that changed my life. Obviously, there's like Full Metal, and Eureka 7 was a big one, but I always go back to Naruto.
All right. And Nana, do you want to answer the question too of which was like the formative anime for you?
Yeah, I think the earliest that I can remember, it's one of the two. I think they actually were airing around the same time, and that was Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z came to America first before Dragon Ball, and Sailor Moon. So those were definitely the like, I got home from school and one was on, and if like that theme, like one of those theme songs were playing, I was hype. Oh my gosh, it doesn't matter which one. That was definitely the starting point.
Both excellent. I do love that like Dragon Ball started as like Journey to the West
Yeah.
and then went completely off the rails. Delicious and amazing. Max, well, what would you say like your formative anime was?
Oh, there's two. The really obvious one is Pokemon. Pokemon is still really, really, really close to my heart, as you can see by this poster here and everything else on the wall. Also, Gundam Wing was like one of the first big animes that hit North America with a dub, and that was my after school every night watching Gundam Wing and drawing all my own little Gundam Wing characters and Gundams and stuff. And yeah, that was Pokemon and Gundam Wing were what got me super into drawing too in animation.
Okay, thank you all for indulging me in that one. Eden, what misconceptions might people outside of the industry have about the work that you do?
Um, so specifically for assistant directing, um, I was recently promoted into this role this year, and people who are outside of the industry often are like, how do you like it? Is it great telling people what to do? And there's this general misconception that when you're moving into a director role, that you're bossing people around and that you're the one in control and that you get to tell everybody what to do all the time. And it's almost the complete opposite. I've been finding that I play more of a support class role. I'm finding things for people. I'm helping them problem solve issues. I'm doing workshops and lessons, and lots of times I'm just trying to like get out of my artist's way and make their path a lot easier so they can do what they need to do for a shot. And also, when you're a director, you're not directing your own project. It's usually a showrunner's project or a client's project. So you're kind of like the middle ground of like, we hired these incredible artists for a reason. I want to make sure that their talents come through and I want to make their jobs as easy as possible. And then also, we're working with these showrunners for a reason. I want their vision to come through as clearly as possible. So it's less bossing people around and having control and being like a puppet master, and more just being like, how can I help you today? How can I make this easier for you? How can I make this note make sense? How can I get you the stuff that you need? So that's been the biggest misconception I've run into with this specific role.
Nana, from your point of view, what misconceptions might people outside the animation industry have about the work in the craft?
I'd say that like the word animation gets mixed up with like there's animation the genre and there's animation the entire pipeline, and then there's literally the process of making stuff move that's at the end of that pipeline, and people will sort of mix those things together. So you have a lot of things like reviewers and people who love to express their opinions on things like YouTube and Twitter, and it's like I like listening to them, period, just because. But but still, I see that there's like a big kind of misunderstanding sometimes in an echo chamber of like that kind of misinformation. For instance, some people will, they'll say animation, like I don't like the animation of this show, but they're really talking about the character design, or they could even be talking about the writing. And it's like the animators have no control over any part of that process. A lot of times, if we think about the pipeline as like this one long thing, it's like the animators are at the almost like the very end, right before post. And a lot of stuff that people probably are like criticizing could be at the very beginning, which is months and months before an animator even touches a piece of paper or like their tablet or anything. So uh, it's kind of like in fandoms like a weird double-edged sword of like they're so passionate, but man, you'll get it one day, buddy. You're kind of messing up on here. But yeah, like social media kind of has like those sort of weird echo chambers, and sometimes I think people's impassioned rants are a bit misdirected. But I have faith that sometimes some of these people who are really passionate, maybe they'll invest more to learn about the process. Maybe they'll get into the industry. Maybe they'll make great things of their own. It always starts somewhere.
My favorite example that I like to bring up is Thundercats Go, where when the trailer for that first launched, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, I really like hate the animation. I preferred it in the original." And if you look at the original Filmation, like Thundercats, there's no animation. They're not animated. It's just like,
Like, we loved it, but it's because there
yeah,
were like 4 other cartoons and all of TV, so you had to watch it. But eh, yeah, those a lot of those 80s tunes, they worked on really tight budgets.
yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, like it or hate it, you know, animation is the stuff moving.
Yeah, it's the stuff moving. Like, we're not in charge of the boards. We're not in charge of the writing, guys. We don't
Character
fund the
designs.
projects. We can't do like we'd love to do the character designs. And I think also something this isn't me trying to shift a lot of stuff on the other parts of the pipeline. There are a lot of great artists that work in builds, work in backgrounds, work in character design. But a lot of times, a lot of this whole process is guided by like a very small few. Usually, like at the very top, might be like the showrunner or the clients, and they have the final say on a lot of what happens. So, sometimes I think if people don't like the design of a show, they'll think like, oh, these artists, they don't know what they're doing. I could draw better. It's like, go find these artists' their personal portfolios. They'll very likely blow you away, but like they're they're being guided by someone else
Yeah.
who's, paying their bills. So
I think part of the thing too is that when people think of animation, the one career that they know is in there is animator. Some people might also know that there's a storyboard artist somewhere too.
Mhm.
And then everything else is just sort of like hazy and blurry. And I guess there's a director in there. Start talking about like compositors and technical directors and effects animation, and things get,
Yeah, it gets hazy, but it's like when you're looking at the credits at the end of the show, they're not just there for a picnic. It's a huge team, and they're all working in tandem, like, at different phases, but they're all working together, and everything has to come together really clean. It's kind of insane when you think about like how just anything of entertainment, like how many pieces are involved to bring something to just viewers.
Maxwell, what other misconceptions might viewers have about the work that you produce?
Off from that, from an animation perspective, I think as we move into a very digital pipeline, a lot of people are under the assumption that computers can kind of do everything for us now. Like we just plug in a character and hit the animate button, and then there's your scene. They don't understand that there's still a lot of work behind the scenes, that the original drawing on paper still is kind of true. We're still sculpting out builds, we're still posing everything and drawing over top of that, that there isn't quite a, a one button that will do it all for us. So people kind of underestimate how much work goes into each scene, each show, each everything.
Yeah, I mean, the software that we make doesn't do really anything for you, right? Like everything that is in a production is built by an artist at some point. You know, the rigs, the backgrounds, the character animation is all done by people who know what they're doing.
Yeah. The tools are making it easier and more efficient for us to do it quicker, like the tweening and envelope deformers and stuff like that, but it's still very much built by an artist, drawn out by an artist. We're still doing the principles of animation, so we're not really there yet with the computers do everything.
Unless we're all computers.
Yes. Or who is real anymore?
Now, Maxwell, in your view, how has the animation industry changed over the past 5 years, keeping in mind that for the past 2.5 years, a lot of things have changed?
I would say the biggest change would be from going into a studio every day and working with a whole team of people face to face. We're now working mostly from home. So we've had to change how we schedule meetings. We can't just have someone come look over our shoulder and say, "Hey, does this character look right? Did I do this? What is this?" We have to plan ahead and make different problem solving decisions or choices for every single established step of the way. In some ways, it's actually good because now we can have artists who are working remotely all over the world join productions that they normally couldn't have without relocating. So that's a really good part of it. But it's still, we're still in the early days of being able to navigate this new frontier of digital working from home animation.
I'm just so glad that this didn't happen back when we just had VHS tapes and fax machines. That would have been rough.
Yeah, sending scenes and paper in the mail, hoping they don't get lost.
Oh my god.
Well, we got the scenes back from overseas, but it didn't come back in this envelope, so... Eden, in your view, how has animation industry changed over the past 5 years?
So in like a crew sense, like I started working 10 years ago, and in the past 5 years, this was already kind of like happening, but it's been a lot more apparent in the past 5 years that people who love animation are a very diverse group of people. There's a lot of marginalized voices who are super passionate about animation, and way back in the day, there weren't so many marginalized voices in positions of leadership or like creative control. And in the last few years, it's been a lot clearer to see, like, you join a crew and a bunch of the supervisors are women, a bunch of the supervisors are people of color. There's a lot more people of color directing, LGBTQ people, like non-binary people, trans people, getting to be in those leadership positions. And sometimes it just hits me, like I think about when I first started, I was the only person in a little tiny satellite studio who wasn't a guy, and it was really, really rough. And now, like, sometimes I'm on a supervisor crew where all of the supervisors are women, and it would just hit me that, like, I've worked on so many crews where all the supervisors are men, and I never thought about it, but this is the first time I've ever been on a crew where all the supervisors are women, kind of thing. So in the past few years, it's been really like joyful for me to see this like push into more actively supporting and making room for marginalized voices. Like, you have to be proactive about it, because if you're not, then you end up falling into bias and issues like that. So like having diversity and inclusion committees that are proactive and like looking at the crew and making safe environments for marginalized people to be in these leadership roles is really important and something new. So I guess, yeah, for me, it feels like there's more room for the people who love, for all the different kinds of people who love animation, to help create it and be in situations and in roles where they can have more of a stronger say, where 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it wasn't the case.
Yeah, I mean, statistically, roughly half the planet is not men.
Yeah.
And you would
Yes.
think that you'd have more women on a crew than people who are named like Mike and have glasses.
Yeah.
Wasn't always the case.
No, especially when you look at college. What's the word I'm looking for? The people who go to college, usually it's majority women, like a ton of people of color. And then when you start looking at studios, you're like, why isn't this reflected the same? But it's been nice to see that shift and have it be more reflected in studios who are actually making the shows. So yeah.
And Nana, in your view, how has the animation industry changed over the past 5 years?
Well, I guess to sort of flip it from not being inside the studio, but for everybody outside the studio who gets to enjoy the work that everyone's producing, something that I've enjoyed a lot is the more diverse storytelling, especially in adult or more leaning towards adult animation. Growing up, of course, like everything for almost everything for animation was supposed to be for children. You had a few outliers, and usually they were kind of pigeonholed only into being like comedies, and they would do kind of like their own very unique sort of comedies, but still it's kind of, this is going to be it. I don't know about the rest of North America, but I know like usually United States, they're just like, this is for children, we're done. But like especially with like streaming, I feel like there's just been more room to grow. We're still getting really great animated shows for the youth, but like things that are just a lot more adult centric. I'd say there's like better, more varied storytelling because you have things like BoJack Horseman and Tuca and Birdie. Castlevania's insane. If you're a child watching this, don't watch Castlevania, please. It's not for you. Um, and you still have really good comedies like like Harley Quinn. Other things that just totally are like we're not going to have any kind of like anything funny. Is like Love, Death, and Robots is wonderful experimental anthologies. You have Arcane, you have Primal. There's a lot of different like just I guess chances or room for like creators to like do something that's not just like we're gonna stick it to kids. I still love like kids animation, really great storytelling through that, but I'm glad that creators also have that option. Like there's a better chance, and I've seen way more of that in the last few years.
I mean, I'm just jealous of kids right now with how good animation is in that category. I know it's an overrepresented category in animation, but I think the kid shows are fantastic right now.
They are.
Um, in terms of what you expect to see more of, or where there's more room in animation, Nano, what sort of genres can be explored that should be?
Like, are you asking like what I would like to see more of, like genre wise, or
Yeah,
just like
yeah, just blue sky. Like, what do you expect to see more of in this industry in the future?
I've really enjoyed. I don't really know what to call it better than like growing pains kind of stories. Like those are weirdly relatable. Like I'm in my 30s, and but sometimes I'll just see like some really special. Like again, Tuca and Birdie is just a really good example of what I would call specifically like women, like or female presenting kind of like growing pain stories. There's a small amount of these like in media period, but when I see them, I seriously appreciate it because it's just not something that I grew up seeing at all. And just I don't know, those are weirdly relatable. There's something strangely comforting, especially if you're just like, we're in the middle of this pandemic and we've all had like some rough moments, let's be real. And then you just kind of see this story where somebody else is kind of, they're having a rough time, but they're growing and they're going to get through it. And strangely enough, there's something like unique. You can do that through animation. And when I see it done really well, I appreciate it a lot. So that is one genre. I talked a lot about just only one genre. I would love to see. I'm quite sure you wanted a list.
No, that's good. I actually like that. Maxwell, if you had to pick one genre that you want to see more of in animation, what would you pick?
Oh, only one. That's a really tricky one to throw at me here.
Well, or give me 12. Either
12.
way works, but it has to be it has to be either 1 or 12, nothing in between.
Oh. Oh, it's really tricky. I like a lot of like creator experimental shows that just come out of nowhere, like people that are just really, really weird, but the technology now is so accessible so they can just make a cartoon, make something and see what sticks. I love that about being able to just put things on YouTube or Newgrounds back in the day. It's just because everything's so accessible. I love that creator driven doesn't necessarily need to please anyone other than the person making it. And if someone watches it, that's a bonus. I'd like to see more of that.
Yeah, I'm really excited by all of the productions that have started with either creating an original series or creating a pilot episode. Like thinking about Has Been Hotel, Hell of a Boss. Um, was it Ollie and Scoops? There are just a lot of really great creator-driven, original, completely independent shows that I'm just really excited for. I think they're really cool. And Eden, if you had to pick a genre or 12, what would you like to see more of in the industry?
Oh, that's a tough question. Uh, like the indie sphere is incredible. Like Max was saying, the accessibility of like learning how to animate, learning how to storytell is so cool, and it's been very fascinating to see how much it's like exploding. and so much great talent who wouldn't have access to like colleges and things like that can just like go out and work and animate and make things that they love. So I'm really excited for more of that. I guess two specific, I don't know if they're really genres, but like obviously I want more adult animation, and like I really love the diversity in adult animation of like the really crude stuff, the really like emotionally complicated stuff, the really experimental stuff like Midnight Gospel. I love all of that, but what I really want to see and what I'm excited about is like kids animation that doesn't talk down to kids. You've been seeing that like more and more in the last few years, but like when I was a kid, a lot of kids cartoons is just like really shallow, don't talk about anything stressful, don't talk about real issues that kids are dealing with. So getting shows like is it called City of Ghosts? That show about LA.
The Elizabeth Ido show?
Yes, yeah. And like other shows that deal with kid perspectives and are like fun and joyful to watch, but also aren't trying to sanitize the world that kids live in and like help them work through big feelings in a way that doesn't talk down to them. Like that stuff really gets me going. And in like blue sky ideal world, I would love a lot more North American stories that are like girl shows where the protagonist is a girl, but it's not. And like I love Sailor Moon, I love like the magical girl stuff, but I really just want to see more like girls kicking and fighting. Like I love more magical girl stuff, but like I grew up watching shonen and I love shonen so much, but there isn't that much like classic shonen where there's a girl protagonist. So I'd really love to just see more of that, of girls like fighting through feelings and like friendship and rivalry and like more messy girls, kind of like the growing pains that Nana's talking about, but for like teens. Yeah.
Love it. I mean, there is so much children's TV that deals with really dark themes now, and I think that's part of the reason why I'm jealous of kids right now, because they have a lot of really good media that I think will be very lasting in a lot of ways. Eden, in your opinion, what are the most important skills for someone in your role?
So for my current role, and I preached about this a lot to like people I've worked with since I was just a little animator, I feel like there's a lot of push for getting like technical skills and artistic skills, but there's not that much push to develop soft skills. And that's like the skills of working within a team, working on how to communicate with each other, and like organizational skills. And I think it's so vital that that's held to the same level of standard as artistic and technical skills, because so often in animation, when you get promoted upwards, there's no training for you, and you kind of have to scramble yourself. And there's oftentimes the strongest artists get promoted, but they might not always have the strongest soft skills. So they get kind of thrown into the deep end and suddenly have to manage a full team and a full team's like emotional state and like make notes clear and accessible and things like that. So I really, and this is something that I am trying to push more in the college classes that I teach, of like, yeah, you should learn how to draw well, but also, do you guys know how to track your quota? Do you guys know how to work together or state your needs or help someone with their needs? All of this is important. Animation's a collaborative team effort. Crews can be like 100 people. So having soft skills is like essential, even if you're just an artist, because you're going to be working with the rest of the team and the rest of the wider crew. Yeah.
I mean, there are productions that fall apart because people don't have those skills, especially in management and leadership.
Yeah. So I just want there to be more support. So if you're a little artist and you start valuing it, your peers will start valuing it, and there'll be more initiatives for training and things like that if we push for it.
Nana, in your opinion, what are some of the most important skills for someone in your role?
Well, Eden kind of took the words out of my mouth. Um, I was actually going to say similarly, like you're going to hear the same kind of like tips, like draw every day, and like it's these are good tips. You always want to be like practicing, and do your best to be on top of your game. However, I would say I would agree, like if you expect to be in any kind of production or project that is a team effort, um, you really do need to know how to communicate well. I've met some really, really great artists who are, fantastic behind the scenes, so to speak. But they don't want to speak up. I'm not talking about from a leadership position. Just pretty much everybody else who's on the ground floor. Perhaps they don't know how to speak up. Perhaps they had like a question or a concern regarding their scenes or something, but they're kind of afraid that they'll stand out and they'll be the nail that needs to be hammered down. Or I don't want anybody to look at me. It's just like it's fine. This is work. We're a team. Please communicate whatever your concerns are, or you might have a really good idea that your leads are like, yeah, actually, we should do it this way. So I would say communication, like, you don't have to change overnight. I was definitely the mousy, quiet, draw in the corner of her notebook kind of kid. You can kind of grow into it, just make incremental steps to be a little bit, you have a voice and you should express it. Also, with that in mind, being like, in a team setting, you're always going to be practicing your work. However, you have to be somebody that needs to know how to take critique. Critique is never going to be like an assault on you or nothing like that. It's a team effort, and it's like we all have to make sure everything that we're doing is going to look like one thing. So if you're getting critique, please never take that hard. Just apply it. It's just notes. Literally everybody's going to get it. Even your leads, they get plenty of notes. So taking critique is always it's a great thing. It shows that you are flexible as an artist. I would say, like in animation, being flexible and adapting is very important, because this industry does just kind of it shifts, it ebbs, it flows. And you don't want to break. You don't want to break under pressure. You don't want to break when something changes. You want to be able to adapt. So I guess that's my advice.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Maxwell, in your opinion, what are the most important skills for someone in your role?
Well, I really think Eden and Nana really covered a lot of this here, what I was going to say. I think growing up or trying to get into animation, there is a huge focus on you have to be the best artist. You have to just focus on your skills, and then everyone will want to work with you and hire you. And that's couldn't be further from the truth. You have to be self-aware enough that you're someone who takes direction well, you're patient, people want to work with you. You don't have to be the strongest animator in the room. You just have to be someone who's willing to work in a team, who's going to take feedback, but also you need to be able to take care of yourself, because this is a very soul-sucking, for lack of a better word, job. You're putting your heart on the page every single day. You might be putting a lot of time, a lot of hours into this, but you also have to be able to just step away. It is a job at the end of the day, and you'll be on production sometimes that they're just a job, and that's okay, but you have to be able to put yourself first. There's a lot of people that just go in at 110%, and then in 3 or 4 years, they're done. They can't do anymore. So my advice would be to focus on these soft skills, of course, but also know your own limitations and put yourself first sometimes. It's okay. It's not selfish. It's not going to sink a production. Production wants to work with you. They want to make sure everyone on the team is doing their best, so they're putting the best work out there. So in that same vein too, if you're struggling, asking for help isn't a sign of weakness either. As someone who's in a leadership role, I would love to hear from my team saying, "Oh, I'm struggling this week. I don't know if I'll get those numbers in," because we can work with you. We want to work with you. We want you happy, and yeah. So just put yourself first.
All right, this was a delight. We're running out of time. Maxwell, where can our viewers find more of your work?
Well, I am on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at WakariMax, WAKARIMAX.com. And that's where I have a series of animation that I do by myself as a one-man show, teaching people about cool things in Japan.
That's awesome. Eden, where can our viewers find more of your work online?
You can find me. I'm most active on Twitter and Instagram. It's just at Eden Timm, EdenTimm. No relation to Bruce Timm. I'm the only Eden Timm on the planet, and usually my work is just GIFs. So if you like that, check it out.
All right. And Nana, where can our viewers find more of your stuff on the interwebs?
Well, if you get on that AOL, I'm just kidding. I think I threw it off. Yeah, but you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Nana ZE Artist. I probably have it on the screen over there. But yeah, I'm probably a bit more active on Instagram. I'm like that lurker who comes in like once a month and I'm like, hey guys, and then I disappear. But yeah, a lot of times I'm just doing doodles, sometimes just animated shorts, just whatever, feels good on like a particular week. So yeah, you can follow me and check me out there.
All right. Well, thank you to our gracious panelists for joining this discussion. And thank you to all our viewers for joining us for the Animation Trends event. This is the first 3-day virtual event hosted by Toon Boom Animation. And be sure to visit toonboom.com to see our full schedule of free interviews, panel discussions, and live art events. You won't want to miss any of it. So be sure to tune in to the next interview.